Decay. Not
Decay.
tooth decay.
Oh, good. I was just making sure. All right. Decay. So how long it takes for a signal to die down? Usually you're talking about in a room. So you've got a lot of reverberation in a room, and decay would just be a measure of, in terms of milliseconds, how long does it take for that sound to stop? So if you walk in your room and you hit a snare drum, I keep talking about snare drums. If you hit a snare drum, how long does that signal reverberate throughout the room until it stops? And that will be decay.
All right. So what is this? What is a Klippel NFS?
I had no idea, man. I don't know. No. It's a near-field scanner. It measures speakers in an anechoic fashion, but without the anechoic chamber. And it's actually what I've got behind me. Yeah. So this little microphone right here spins around this speaker 360 degrees and goes above and below it. I'm trying to get the angles right here, but it measures it close to the speaker, so it will basically mitigate room reflections. So the room reflections don't play a part into the actual measurement. And then it uses all sorts of fancy math that hopefully Klippel will be able to explain one day on my channel. Hopefully we're going to do a review or a video soon to discuss it. And it backs out the near field sound to a far field distance. And near field is basically when you're too close to a speaker and the different speakers like a tweeter and a woofer aren't able to sum properly because you're too close. And far field will be when you've hit the point where you're no longer too close. And then further far field will just be even further from near field, far field transition.
So Klippel NFS is the reason why you want to subscribe to Aaron's channel, basically.
Yes. I mean, that's one of the reasons. Now, I do all sorts of things like, well, we can't get into it here, but yeah, I do other things that people might want to look at,
That in the face.
That's what I was thinking, but I haven't had the work done yet. That's coming maybe in like a year. I've got to wait till my channel to get a little bit bigger. Surgery's getting expensive,
I know, right? Well, you had to hold off on it because that Klippel was pretty expensive.
Yeah, no,
you guys can go and look that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so MMM. So
I thought of the Crash Test Dummy song. Moving microphone method or measurement, depending on how you define it. Yeah. That's actually, so let's say you've got a measurement microphone. This is not a measurement microphone, but you've got a measurement microphone to do RTA in your room. Moving microphone measurement will just be moving the microphone around.
What kind of nerds are we where you can just turn around and just have a microphone?
Well, yeah.
Who does that?
There's that one.
There's.
Hold up. I got another one over here. No, actually I do. Hold on.
This is bad.
Audio nerds. Yeah, this is. Hey, you know what this is?
Who makes that one?
It says Earthworks on it.
Oh, man. Whoa.
Yeah. That means I'm legit.
You are. I know. Let me put this away here.
Yeah.
Hey, Mini DSP. This thing is awesome. Everybody who's serious about this should have one of these.
I agree.
Inexpensive.
They are. They're like $99.
Less now.
Is it? Yeah. And the software that you would use with it is free. Room EQ Wizard. You can go and download that for free. There's no reason why people can't take in-room response measurements of their systems, and especially when you've got an issue you're trying to figure it out.
In-room measurement?
In-room measurements. Yes, in-room measurements. So in the world of audio measurements, what I do on my channel is anechoic measurements because I'm trying to take the room. Yes, there we go. I'm trying to take the room out of the speaker response because what I want to do is provide you with a prediction of how the speaker is going to play in everybody's room, but you can't do that. Yeah, predicted in-room response. See, I'm just blowing right through this and I don't even mean to. But the idea is that you provide a prediction and then you guys out there watching my channel or reading my reviews or whatever can go and say, okay, based off of this data and based off of this other speaker that Aaron's already measured, I know I like this sound and I'm looking to upgrade to something. This one has a similar characteristic to it. So that's probably a good one to try first rather than just guessing blind or just saying, hey, my buddy told me to buy this. You have some kind of way to go about it and look at it, get stuff. But if you want to do an in-room measurement, and to get help, like let's say you're having an issue and you go to one of these forums, the first thing most people are going to ask you, do you have an RTA for that? Do you have an in-room measurement at your listening position? So you would do that with what Joe said, the UMic 1 or even the UMic 2, whichever one you want to get now, because they got two versions out now, a little bit different. And you would use REW to measure the room. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to set that stuff up. So easy to do. And then you can measure the in-room response and then provide it to the people on the forum and they can help you. And yeah, or if you're doing the EQ stuff, that's another reason why you would need it as well.
And let me just kind of go on this. So moving mic measurement it's doing it you're taking a bunch of measurements in real time and it's taking an average over time. And so it'd be kind of equivalent to taking a bunch of measurements and then averaging them together. And so it's useful just because it's fast. right?
Yep.
If it's just something quick that you need, a lot of times a moving mic measurement is good.
And it's pretty
in room,
accurate.
so in room versus anechoic. So anechoic, what does that mean specifically? Anechoic,
Without
anaerobic.
echo,
What does anechoic mean?
without reflection, without echo.
Like, so the opposite of what's going on in that room right now.
The opposite. That was exactly what I was going to say. The total opposite of what's going on in this garage. Yeah. So my kid has taken over my computer room. She's playing kind of, I don't know, game or something on the computer. I said, "Can I have this room?" She's like, "Oh." I'm like, "Fine, I'll go in the garage." Whatever.
Okay, so how about this? So I have two of them. I'm not gonna trick you, but there's acoustics, and then the next one's psychoacoustics.
I guess acoustics would be like what is actually going on, what you can actually measure because you have to prove it. And I would assume that psychoacoustics would just be falsities in what you hear, possibly potential falsities, what you think you hear.
Right. So this is where it gets interesting to me because acoustics is exactly what's happening in your room, what you can measure. Psychoacoustics, the way I see it, is the way that you perceive that as a human being. So now you're talking about the biological and whatever how your ear works and the psychology. So there's all these different aspects where the different sciences kind of come together, right?
Right.
And that's where it gets a little bit tricky.
And a good example of that, like, let's say you did a study of 100 people and everybody agreed that this speaker sucked. And then you told your buddy, this is the best speaker in the world. You got him hyped up. He went in and listened to it. And with that in his mind, he said, "Oh man, this is a great speaker." But otherwise he would have said, "No, this speaker sucks."
Yeah, they should call it psychopsychology.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if that's where it came from.
Psycho, yeah.
Yeah.
Room correction and room treatment. How about those?
Yeah, that's so going back to the moving microphone measurement stuff that we talked about. Room correction would be a way to provide you with a response in your room, in your seated position that you like. So let's say that you measure your room has too much bass or something like that. You would use room correction to attenuate that bass in certain frequencies to get some of those boomy, peaky resonances out of it, stuff like that.
And it's kind of tricky because you're actually not correcting your room. Only treatment is really correcting the room itself. Right. It's more correcting how it sounds within your room.
Right.
And you're actually just correcting the frequency response of that speaker to accommodate, right? Using
and that's the bad thing. Well, yeah, you could take a good speaker and put it in a bad room and then have to use room correction, basically equalize that good speaker, and then it kind of sucks, So that's why you kind of want a healthy dose of both.
So right here we have EQ and we have PEQ. EQ meaning like a graphic equalizer, and then PEQ, parametric equalization. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between these two?
So graphic equalizers usually are 1/3 octaves. So if you just want to talk about the mid-range, it's 100 hertz, 125, 160, 200, 250, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So every 1/3 octave is typically how a graphic equalizer is set up. And it has fixed Q, so which means that the width of how far those adjustments are made into other frequencies. So for example, let's say we're talking about 200 hertz. You want to drop that 3 dB on your graphic EQ. Well, that 200 hertz is going to bleed over into 250 hertz and 160 hertz a little bit, depending on how much you change that equalization, plus or minus. Whereas with a PEQ, as a parametric EQ, you can actually go in and set it yourself how wide you want that attenuation or opposite of attenuation, that boost to be. So you can make it very, very narrow, so it would only hit 200 hertz and nothing else. Or you can make it very, very wide, which you would hit 200 out to 800 and down to 50 hertz or something like that.
So being able to change that Q.
Yeah, that's a huge factor. Yeah, because then you could specifically target resonances. Bass is a perfect example. Like 80 hertz may sound great in your room, but you got a strong peak at 77 hertz. You want to go hit 77 hertz. You don't want to touch 80.
And I think, I don't have it here, but I think tone control is important to mention also. How you have bass and treble, and usually it hinges at 1 kilohertz. So I think that's fine. I think that's good. I would actually prefer one that's just a tilt. That would be a great knob to have.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of DSPs, there's shelf filters too. So instead of just being, you can go in and set how much you want to change at that shelf filter point. So let's say again, 2 kilohertz, and you want to add just a flat plateau across 2 kilohertz and above. Then you would go in and do that with the shelf filter. So it wouldn't be a slope, but you would just go in and you would just flatten everything above that. Shelf filters are great, man. They're a great thing to have, especially with horns.